Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Opti TV at home. In this episode, we're going to be chatting with Coach Omari Scott of the Coral Reef Yacht Club Youth Sailing Program. Besides being a personal friend of mine, he's also the head Opti coach there. And we're going to be getting to know him a little bit, his time in Antigua, as well as his experiences in the Opti game and abroad. Let's do it. So Omari, welcome to Opti TV. It's a pleasure to have you on. I want to say thank you for coming aboard and spending some time chatting with me. I know that a lot of people know of you and have had the pleasure of working with you in the Opti coaching circuit. But my first question to you today is, how are you?
Thanks for having me on. No problem at all. As you know, I'm always willing to help out, especially when it comes to sailing. Right now, I'm doing fine, being responsible. You know, the COVID-19 has this world flipped upside down. So being responsible, staying indoors, praying for all the individuals who've lost loved ones, things like that. But yeah, I'm being responsible, developing a routine now at home, going out, working out, that type of stuff, trying to get some stuff done that I, probably should have done a long time ago, but now I have the time to do so. So it's pretty much it, man. Just being responsible, staying at home, praying, making sure everybody, hoping that everyone gets through this whole thing in a good way.
Yeah, I definitely understand that sentiment because a lot of people are affected by this COVID-19 pandemic, and there's a lot of kids stuck at home right now wishing that they could be on their Opti. But, we are sailors, and sailors are adaptable, and we do our best. When the time comes, we'll all be back out on the water. But tell me, we're here kind of chatting with you a little bit about, how you came up through sailing and how you grew up in Antigua. So what was it like growing up in Antigua? How did you start sailing?
First of all, Antigua is awesome. Growing up there was very free. I was surrounded by the water, surrounded by the ocean, and had access to the beaches and the ocean whenever I wanted, fishing, swimming, whatever I wanted to do. So it was almost inevitable that I was going to end up somehow doing something on the water. So I started sailing like, any other youngster. I started at the early age of 5 years old, started with my older brother and some of his friends that were much older than I was. And the yacht club, Antigua Yacht Club, was, 5 minutes walk away from where I lived, where I grew up. So it's very easy. So started in a summer camp. And at the yacht club, it was quite different from what summer camps are here in the US or maybe other places in the world, simply because, we didn't have the resources. The way we did it was we had like a laser, and we would have 3 persons to a laser, 1 person driving, 1 person doing the main sheet, and usually the youngest person sitting on the bow. And basically, as you get better and gain more experience, you'll rotate backwards throughout the boat. So you go to main sheet and then to actually driving. So that's kind of how we started our summer camp. That's how I grew up sailing. At first, sitting on the front of a boat, just excited to be out there, being on the water as usual, and then also being with my brothers. And that was just, the summer went by quickly because of sailing. We were super excited to be able to go out and sail.
Right. So sounds like you grew up in a setting that a lot of kids coming up today are very familiar with, kind of a community sailing sort of experience. But and when you were coming up, did you have a coach? Did you sail Optis?
Yeah, so I grew up, and basically when we started our club, only had lasers. As you know, lasers are the second largest class in the world, just behind the Optis. So when I started, we didn't have any other boats but lasers. So we started and we had 3 persons per boat. But yeah, we had a coach who, was the guy who is currently running the sailing program and has been running for, I think, at least 20, 25 years. His name is Carl James, and he's a 2-time Olympian in the laser class. And just growing up, he was my coach. A few years after, maybe when I was about 9 or maybe 10, the club got their first set of Optis. And it was just amazing because for me, I went from just being on a boat with 2 other sailors to being in my own boat. So that got me even more excited. My coach is pretty tough, kind of the kind of way that I coach right now. He's pretty tough, and he really does believe that hard work is the way to go to be able to gain or to get the results. So he was pretty tough. You know, we used to train maybe 4 days a week and a day on the weekend, things like that. But it was just awesome growing up and having someone there to watch over us as we sail and just kind of help us out with the things that we can improve on and things like that. So yeah, my coach was a really good friend and mentor, and he helped me a whole lot and has a lot to do with where I am right now.
So, tell me, what was your favorite part about growing up sailing Optis and lasers in Antigua Yacht Club?
You know what, man? In the beginning, it was, as I said, it was about fun. You know, just being out there in the water, something in the water that I'm accustomed to, obviously, but being out there, having the ability to be able to sail a boat around the harbor, around the bay, was awesome. So for me, in the beginning, it was all about fun. Um, and once we started racing, we got Optis, and it became a little more serious. That was fun too, but for me, it was fun in another way. You know, I kind of grown out of just the fun being on the water and more about I got a kick out of racing. I got a kick out of the competition. I got a kick out of being able to outsail my competitors. You know, whether it's tactically or strategically, it's like playing chess. So for me, when I was able to outsail my competitors, that was me having fun, you know, because I felt like, man, I just did this right. You know, I saw this cloud coming, no one else saw it, and look what happened. So for me, it moved from just having fun being on the water in general to competing, loving competition, and just getting a kick out of being able to outsail competitors by using tactics, strategy, and you know just maneuvers and rules. So it it just changed from just a beginner sailor to a racer. My fun came in from different directions.
So eventually, like you were saying, you became competitive in the Opti class and started traveling and competing within the Virgin Islands and the Caribbean. But eventually, you kind of, took that passion for competition into the next stage when Hampton University took an interest in you. What was the transition to college sailing like? Was it hard?
The transition was for me pretty difficult. Growing up in Antigua, as I said, we didn't have the resources in terms of um, just different type of boats. So we didn't have double-handed boats. So I grew up with the Optis and then to the lasers. So it's all single-handed. Even though I was competing regionally, things like that, the big thing was, yes, moving to college was different for me because I went in and now I all of a sudden have to share a boat with someone. And I quickly found out that uh, it's not the same. Obviously, I used to just tack in my laser on my Opti and I did my tack the way I wanted it, and that was it. Now I had to sail with someone, and they had to know exactly what I was going to do, or else I was going to lose that person. So I had to be more of a person who was able to work along with others more than I've actually ever done in my life of sailing. So that was a little difficult at first. It took a few months to be able to get to a point where it was comfortable and my crew trusted me because that was huge. And you know, but apart from that, it was just the move for me was a little difficult, but I was ready for it. You know, I was leaving my family and everything behind to move to a new country, coming to the US on my own. That was difficult. Hampton University, for a lot of people who don't know, it's the only HBCU with a sailing team, which is a historically black college. And I think it is still the only HBCU with a sailing team. Um, and Gary Bodie, who's part of US Sailing, actually coached at Hampton University. So just moving there for me, just uprooting, moving from the Caribbean to the US, having to deal with the weather changes, having to deal with the cultural change, um, was difficult. But I acclimated to it. I got accustomed to it because of sailing. I was able to sail 4 days a week. We did tour days in the gym. So the sailing part really kept me excited. And yeah, it was a little bit difficult, but overcame it, fit in really quickly. The sailing part came along after a little bit of struggle in the beginning, trying to go from a single-handed sailor to a double-handed sailor. Communication improved a lot. That was part of it. But yeah, it was a little difficult, but it was all things that I could achieve, and I did after a little time being there.
So it seems like overcame some adversity in college sailing and rose through the ranks because as I understand, the Roy Disney and the Disney company came knocking because they were interested in you for the Morning Light project.
Yeah, I think, as I said, being in college was pretty awesome. I started out, it was a little bit rough, just because of the change and being able to swap boats from going single-handed to double-handed. But once I got a hang of it, I started doing pretty well in regattas, things like that, because I'm a sailor at heart, and I just needed to just get familiar with the boats. The Morning Light project was something that was very special. For a lot of people who don't know, or it was just a situation where they had a bunch of applicants that were going out throughout the entire US, I think Canada, maybe the world. And they ended up picking 30 sailors from all these applicants that was supposed to fly out to Long Beach, California, and do this week-long trials for them to select 15 to go onto the Morning Light project, which is a boat which is on a TP52, which is a racing machine, and do an ocean race from Long Beach, California to Hawaii. I was fortunate enough to be one of those 30 sailors who were selected. An interesting story, that summer, when they called me and said, hey, we need you to come out to Long Beach, I was in Falmouth, England. I just did a crossing on a boat from Antigua to the UK. And they flew me out from the UK back out to LA, or to Long Beach, to be able to do the trials. And that was pretty awesome experience. Just, you had the cameras in your face. They did a lot of team building exercises. They had us on Catalinas. I think it was 37s, maybe it's 36. I can't remember. But they have us on those boats in teams, and we were just, doing man overboard drills. We're racing. We're moving people through different positions on the boat, things like that. So it was just an awesome experience. I met so many new people there who are now currently my friends, and a lot of guys who've gone on to do big things in the sailing world, like Volvo Ocean Races, guys who are big tacticians on boats, and J70s and world champions, things like that. Some of these guys I actually sailed against in college during that time. So I knew of some of them. I weren't really friends with them, but I knew some of them. But it was just, I just met so many new people, and people that I'm still really good friends with right now.
That's amazing. I remember watching the Morning Light project back when I was in college and saying, wow, that is something I would love to have been a part of. But, it's not about me right now. It's about you and,
It's
the,
always about you, man.
the, yeah, the high level coaching that you bring to the Opti Circuit, because now as the, head coach for the Coral Reef Yacht Club, which is one of the top Opti programs in the country. From that point where you ended your college sailing career and took it to the next step, how did you end up coaching? What kind of what drew you to coach after sailing in college?
You know what, man? It's a very interesting story, and it came a long way, because honestly, just for me, being able to go to Hampton and sail was a huge opportunity that I almost didn't take, but I did, and up to this day, it's still one of the best decisions of my life doing that. And the way it happened for me, after I did this, I realized, man, we have so many people in the Caribbean who have the ability and the talent, even just back in Antigua, to be able to go to college and sail, but a lot of these guys never had the opportunity, never thought about going to college as a way to improve themselves. So for me, what I did, I knew that whatever I did in life, whether it's work or whatever I did, was I wanted to find a way that I can give back in some way. So when I first started in Antigua in the Caribbean, really what I wanted to do was kind of give back to the Caribbean. I wanted to share my knowledge of what I learned in college and give back to those guys who, in the Caribbean, who don't have the coaches who come in and fly in and coach them. And I just wanted to share that experience that I learned with those guys to help them be better sailors, so that they can also have the opportunity and know that, hey, there's a pathway for this. And I think that I was just so fortunate and happy that I had the opportunity, that I felt like it would be very selfish of me to not share with others. So at first, when I was in the Caribbean, that was my whole plan. My whole plan was, look, the Caribbean, we have the water, we have the weather. We should have the best sailors in the world, because we have the ability to sail 365 days a year. The only thing that was missing is obviously just the resources, financially, purchasing boats, things like that was a little bit difficult for us during that, in the Caribbean, but we had all the other things. So with me thinking that and me wanting to give back, I came back to the Caribbean. I was the national team coach for St. Lucia. I was the national team coach for the British Virgin Islands. And basically what I did was help to transform those programs from just learn to sail programs into programs where you had racers who were able to go internationally and compete. Some of these guys end up sailing in college. Some of these guys are Olympic hopefuls, things like that. So I tried to give back, share my knowledge to help these guys to elevate so they can have the same opportunity that I did. And then in terms of just my overall coaching, being at Coral Reef, after that, as I said, I knew that I wanted to do something that was going to help me to give back. And I thought that coaching was the thing that I thought I knew how to do well. I thought that I was good at it. And I figured that me sharing my knowledge to whoever it is in sailing was a way of me giving back. So up until today, yes, I work and I get paid, but I still feel like I'm doing a service by sharing my knowledge and giving it to people who may need it or who don't know at all. So that's part of the reason why I do it. And for me, working with kids is the greatest way, because it's no other joy than watching kids when they're like 9, 10 years old and you're working with them. And then 10 years from now, they're in the Olympics or they're doing something really great that you're like, man, I worked with this kid, so you feel like you can't help but feel like you have something to do with their development and where they are right now. And for me, just the process of working with a kid and watching them grow day by day, month by month, year by year is huge. And it just makes me feel like, hey, me giving back is actually working and it's helping others. And that's kind of why I got into coaching. I just wanted to share what I know and what I think I was good at with others and help them.
So, you've been hitting on a lot of points as to why, one would want to get into coaching. But for you specifically, what is your philosophy behind developing sailors? Because you've been able to place kids onto the U.S. World's team with consistency. Your kids are, in the top 10% of any regatta that they go to, if not outright winning. So what's your philosophy? What is your motivation to do it in that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, my style of coaching, obviously, like most other sailors or most other people, comes from the way they were coached. And a lot of people take a lot from their old coaches. And then what I've done is kind of mix it in a little bit with my own style. So the first thing is I have a few things. I mean, my thing is I believe in hard work. I believe that the way to get anywhere is to put in the work. And if you want to be better than everybody else, you have to put in more work than the competitors. So I always push that. My way of coaching is a very high level, very intense in terms of, I believe if you race the way you train. So if sailors come in and they want to mess around in practice, they can't expect to do very well at regattas. It's not like flicking a light switch. So you race the way you train. So I try to provide training sessions that are very intense to keep the sailors training the way that they would like to race. The other thing I think it's very important to have communication. I think it's probably the most important thing. When you think about the age group that you're coaching, you want to think about what appeals to that age group. And when we deal with optis and younger kids need to have faith. They need to trust in whoever they're around. Once you can get them to trust you, then they're able to perform, they will listen, they will believe in the things you're saying. So it's very important to have like an open communication with the sailors. You can be very tough with the sailors, but it's very important that they see the soft side, the downside of you, because they want to have fun. It's all fun for them, regardless if it's trying to get to a goal or not. They want to have fun. And you have to be able, as a coach, to be both sides of the coin. You cannot just be a dictator the entire time. You need to be able to sit down, have kids, take them out for ice cream, things like that. Have 10 minutes of joke time before you start getting serious. So communication for me is one of the most important things. And just, respect, I think is very important. The kids have to not just respect the coach, but respect each other and understand that each person's success on the team is because of the next person next to them, the other sailor. Because I can't train how to do starts without my other 20 buddies. I can't do speed tests by myself. I need at least one other person. So I teach the kids, yes, to compete, but you're competing against each other. So it's like you're friends in competition. So at training, you want to push each other, and the same at regattas, but realize that when you're pushing each other, it helps every person to get better. So that's another thing that I believe. And just the last thing is just the environment, creating that environment that is great for competition, that's great for training, right? You have to have the right environment in terms of the right people, the right sailors in the program, the right coaches to help push the sailors forward, the right venues in terms of where you sail, whether you're sailing in Miami or you're sailing in a place that's super cold that the kids can't get to come out. So I think the environment is huge. So for me, it's just a combination of things, but I think really communication is very key. Getting the sailors to trust you and open up and listen to you, and for them to understand that, hey, you're not just a coach all the time. You can also lay back and chill out. So it's just um, what's the word? But a combination of different things that go into, I think, what brings out successful sailors.
Wow, I mean that's pretty well said, and I agree with that concept because, especially because we're working with kids. Kids respond well to boundaries, and they respond well to trust. And I also think that trust is a big part of it. But I think you're definitely right, communication, because kids are not. I mean, no one is a mind reader, but kids also are always looking for you for approval. So if you're not communicating, what your thoughts are on their progress, or having that sort of relationship where it's a give and take, not just that you're taking from them, I think is important. So for all of you listening, maybe look at how you're talking to your kids. But for you, working at such a high level, Opti is not a high performance boat, but you're in a high performance program. What's the hardest part about coaching Optis at that level?
I think it's just dealing with all the different things that are coming at you at the same time. Because again, we go back to the age of the kids. Kids at that age are not by themselves. They have their parents there, and the parents do a lot to have kids in the program, and there's a lot of expectations sometimes. We just got to remember that it's all about fun, whether a kid is successful or not. And for a lot of these kids, some kids will go on to be the best sailors in the world, and others will just want to cruise the bay. And we have to understand that that's part of sailing. But in a sailing program, you have to be able to provide for both sides, right? So one of the hardest things is having to deal with, expectations from the kids, expectations from the parents, expectations from the coaches, and that's kind of difficult. So what it is, it's just be able to create standards within your program that everyone understands. This is how it is. This is how things are going to go. Understand that we, the coaches, are here in the best interest of the kids at all times. And just understand, regardless if your kid becomes a rock star or not, and the same for the coaches, because those kids have parents, but we also feel like they're our kids. So when I say that, it's a whole community. Whether or not your kid becomes a rock star or not, the main goal is for that person to have fun. Like if that person is showing up and they're not having fun, then they need to find another sport, you know? So one of the hardest things is just, keeping up the standards is difficult because, as you said, as a big program, you want to keep the standards high. And that is kind of difficult because as a coach and as a head coach, you want to make sure that you have the right coaching staff. You want to make sure that you have the right training curriculum and regime for every day, every week. And that's something that I have to do. And that's something that I have some experience in. So, at this point, it's not super, super hard, but it's something that you definitely have to put some planning into, to make sure that you keep up the performance. That's one of the big things, just making sure that, you're going to have some down years when you have sailors rotating out and moving on. And that's every program. And we have to understand that, but we have to understand how to get back, and the only way to do that is to have some standards, have some things in place, a curriculum that pushes you to that point. And just in sailing, we just have to all understand it's a process. It's a process, These kids are like blank sheets, and what we write, what they learn is what we write in them, what we give them, what we tell them, and the things that we give for them to use. And if we fill up that blank sheet with great information, at some point, maybe not just in the Opti, maybe not just now because Opti is the beginning, but 10 years from now, all of those things may click. It may click, and that guy becomes the best sailor in the world. So, great Opti sailors are a good thing. When you become a good Opti sailor, it just means that you're processing the information a lot faster. But if you're a sailor who's out there, you love the sport and you're racing and maybe you're not doing so well, it's not the end because you can move on to the next boat 5 years from now and you become the best in the class, So it's just about understanding what the process is, understanding that fun is the number one thing for these kids when you're out there. And once they're having fun, and if they can do that while performing, and as I said, for me, when I started racing, fun for me was outsmarting my competitors. And if they can have fun while doing that, then there's no stopping them. But the biggest thing is, keeping up the high level of the program and having things in place to make sure that that happens, and also just balancing expectations between coach, parents, and the kids, because we all have to work together. We need each other to make sure that the program runs well and the kids, we get the best for the kids.
I most definitely agree with that. The only time I've seen, let's just say, a long-term success in an Opti sailor's life is when the coach, the parent, and the sailor are all in tune. And sometimes that's really hard to achieve, just because of different reasons. But when you do, it's really amazing to see how far kids can take it, and then the passion that they develop and take into the next boat. But switching gears here a little bit, you're a pretty renowned coach, not just in the U.S. but worldwide, with a lot of experience in the international Opti circuit. For those who maybe haven't, both parents and sailors, right, who haven't yet had the chance to be on an international event, what's different about them that could be difficult for someone going out there for the first time?
Yeah, international events can be very scary, especially for the sailors, and pretty overwhelming for the parents as well. You think about yourself leaving your homeland, your state, your country, to go to another country, and if you're an English speaker and you go to France or Spain, and you end up in a Spanish country and you don't know what's going on, you can't understand the language, that could be very overwhelming for parents and also sometimes for coaches. But what it is, it's just different. The climate, the people you're around, the culture, the food. Sometimes you go there and you maybe not like the food that they have there, and it's like you have tough time eating, things like that. So it's difficult just because you're going to a different place. You're seeing how they do things over there, and it might be completely different from what you're accustomed to. So having some experience with travel and going to international events is very important. Also, the experience comes with meeting people from different countries, coaches that could actually help you in different things, whether it's logistically, hey, I need a coach boat. I'm arriving this time. Do you have a sail? The sail got left on the plane. Can I borrow a sail from you? Things like that is very important because, now, doing my international coaching stuff, I've met so many guys from different countries, from Turkey and Australia and Ireland, who are now very good friends of mine who I wouldn't have known unless I've traveled to these events. So for a lot of people a lot of coaches who are not able to venture out, these are the type of things that they're missing. But it's something that they can get to, and once you get there, you'll find international events a lot easier to go to. And just for the sailors, it's just a different environment, and they can go out and you're accustomed to sailing against people who all have USA sail code and numbers on it, and then you go there and you see sailors from all different countries, and it's very important that they understand that they're all sailing the same boat. It's a one design boat. All kids are the same age. They're all there to do the same thing, have fun and compete. And the more they do it, the more events they do, the more comfortable they will become. And pretty soon, international events will just be like a home event. So that's just kind of how it works.
I have not had the opportunity to race when I was younger internationally, but I've been able to race as an adult internationally. So, I think I think you're spot on in saying that the unfamiliarity of it, can be daunting. But once you kind of open up and just kind of see it for what it is, and it's sailing, you become a lot more comfortable and have a better go at it. But in your opinion, you were speaking about seeing how they do things over there in the new venue. For you, do you see a difference in how other countries do, run their Opti circuit versus the U.S.? Is there any difference?
Yeah, I think there's a few differences. I mean, there's every country have their own style of how they want to do it. Every country have their own belief. Every coach have their own belief of what they think and philosophy of what they think is best. Um, and a lot of people are restricted. Some countries can do certain things a certain way because of the size, and others can't. You know, one of the things that I think that may be different. I know right now in the U.S., the U.S. organization, USODA, is doing a really good job of trying to up the level of the Opti program. That is the goal. They're trying to up the level as much as they can, and they try to put in and instill different things that's going to be able to do that. One of the things that I think that might be different on the international level than what we do here is one of the big things is most of the countries that I know, when they go to for their selections, they either do a ranking system or well, mostly a ranking system, or they do like a 3 or 4 event situation, where we don't. So it's a situation where they have the sailors sailing all year, and basically they have events, and through those events they will rank the sailors. So at the end, when they do their last event, they will have scores of the top 5 sailors, and those guys will go to Worlds. But those top 5 sailors were the top 5 sailors throughout the entire season. So for me, I think you have your best 5 sailors right there. Whereas in the US, we have a situation where we do like a team trials, which is like a one event situation that picks or determines who goes to these events. Now, I think it's a, there's a positive and a negative to that. When you go to big events, you want to have your sailors that are clutch. So you say, okay, guys, this is the one event. You win this one, you finish top 5, you go to the World Championships. And the guys who show up on that regatta and is able to pull it out and be most ready, there's something to be said for that. These guys are clutch at that point, right? But there's also another side to that where you can have different things happen. You can have uh, a sailor who's 110 pounds and he's been top 5 every regatta, or top 10 or whatever it is, really good sailor, but he goes to trials where the trial is 5 knots and he finishes 6 or 7 at the trial. Does that mean that that guy is not one of your best sailors in the country? No, it just means that the conditions weren't suitable for him, so he didn't finish second, he finished 7th, right? So what tends to happen is a kid that's maybe 75 pounds that have decent ability would qualify for Worlds, right, and go to Worlds, and that may have been his first good event, and it's at team trials, but he doesn't have the experience at all. I mean, he ends up going to a World Championship that's in Antigua or in Garda that is like 20 knots every day, but he just qualified in an event that was 5 knots. So we end up sending a team of 5 to a World Championship in a windy venue, right, with all of our light air sailors. Now, what we want to do and what we should be thinking is we want to send our best overall sailors. We want to send a guy that in 15 knots will be for sure top 5. And if he's a little bit heavier and it gets light, in 5 knots, he can still finish top 10, right? We want the guy that's able to perform well. He might be better in heavier wind, but good in light wind. We don't really want to send the guys that are really good in light wind, but not
That
so
makes
good
a
at all
lot of sense. That makes a
in
lot of
windy
sense.
conditions. So I think what a lot of the countries are doing and what we can do is if we have a ranking system, we could send our best overall sailors. Now we're a little bit limited with that because most of the countries are smaller than we are, all the countries. So basically what it is, a lot of those other countries can do a ranking system because people can drive from one event to the next as much as they want. Whereas in the US, everything's a flight, right? So it's difficult when you have to ask the West Coast guys, hey, you got to come out here to this regatta because this is a qualifying regatta, one of the qualifiers, or you're asking East Coast to go west or South to go north or vice versa. So that's the problem that the US faced in terms of the ranking system, I think. But I think in terms of having your best overall sailors at an event, I think a ranking system might be something we need to look into. I just don't have the answer of to how to do it just because the size of the country. And I think that it's the same thing with the organization. I mean, they maybe probably think that it's a great idea too, but how do we do that without, having to force people to fly around the world and just think about school and things like that. So that's one of the huge differences that I know for sure that a lot of other countries have with their international Opti circuit than what we have.
Well, that makes sense, because having a ranking system will ensure that, the U.S. is putting out a consistent group of sailors out there in contention for the Worlds because, as a country, and I know that U.S. sailing is been making great strides in order to win medals again, and I think at this point we're not talking about just getting a kid into a boat and having fun. I think, what we're talking about now is the Opti in the sport at its highest levels. If we're searching for medals, I think we need the best kids. However, don't you think that having a sort of situation where you have to be traveling a lot to go to these, let's say, 5 classification regattas is kind of favoring the kids who have more resources to travel versus the ones that don't?
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's part of the issue, right? That's part of the issue that we have to factor in because, as I said, it goes back to what I said about the size of the country. Whereas if you're in a smaller country, these guys can just drive, and that's not as big of an expense as if you have to fly in the U.S. from place to place. So that's probably part of the reason why the U.S. probably doesn't have it because, again, you're forcing people to travel 3, 4 times how many ever events they need to go to be able to qualify for this ranking system, um, to be able to have a chance. So again, like there's some people who maybe just don't have the resources to be able to move around that much, but it doesn't mean that your kid is not like a really rock star sailor. So it's one of these things where you have to kind of balance it. You're right. I mean, finances is huge, and if in the U.S. you have to travel by plane to be able to get to these events, it's just a little more expensive. Whereas some of the other countries, you can drive from Italy and go to Germany and you can just drive everywhere. So it's and if you're doing it in one country, then in Italy you can drive from place to place. You can drive from Venice to Garda. You can drive. So you can have those events, and instead of people spending the money to fly and have to do hotels, they can drive and they can come in their camper and they can camp out, and it's 3 times less than what you would have to do here in the U.S. flying from west to east and spending nights in hotels and Airbnb. So yes, it does create expense and financial difference, and that could be part of the problem. So, with the U.S., it is a good reason to have a good reason to have a ranking system. It's just it adds a little bit of a difference because of the size of the
I
country.
don't know that, between you and me we can figure it all out, but I know that the answer is somewhere. We've got enough good people now in the Opti class that I have hope that they can figure it out. Now, as a coach, what do you think is the biggest hurdle to start traveling internationally and get, hooked into the US ODA, coaches system, where you can start to work with kids at the highest levels in the sport?
In terms of the U.S., I think we have, as you said before, we have great people, great minds in the U.S. organization who are really pushing for the best. I think in terms of the U.S. getting into USODA, I think they're out there and they're trying to give everyone an opportunity. I know for the international teams and stuff, they really try to rotate the coaches, things like that, because they want to give everyone the opportunity. They realize that every coach in this country are part of the development of every one of these kids. So, it's kind of like only fair to have coaches be a part of it. In terms of being with the U.S. national team and stuff like that, I do know they're trying to give people opportunities. They're moving around the national team clinics to different places. And when they move around the clinics to different states, things like that, they allow that club that's hosting to have like invites, you know. So some of your regular guys from your program who may not be national team sailors would get an invite to join the practice. That's good. The coach or the head coach who's there, two of the coaches that are at that program, will also be invited to coach. You know, they could be part of the whole coaching thing. So that gives them experience. And, you know, the other thing is just your program kind of speaks for yourself. You know, once you start having these sailors perform, and that's kind of how I do, I allow the sailors and the sailors' performance to kind of speak for me. Once that starts happening, then you kind of take notice and people start saying, oh, you know, these kids are from Coconut Grove, Coral Reef, you know, JK Sailing, whatever program they're from. And obviously, if there's kids that are doing really well during the program, it must mean that there's a good system there, good coaching, a good setup that's allowing these kids to succeed. So for me, I think that the USODA or the national team is doing a good job of trying to incorporate a lot of the U.S. coaches when they move the events and the practices to different clubs. They allow or give the opportunity to local coaches to be able to be part of it, as well as the local sailors who are not on the national team. I think that's good, and I think internationally they've been trying to really um, they're trying to rotate a lot of the coaches, and what they will do, I think, from my experience and what I think, is a lot of times they'll go to big events like Garda where they send three coaches, or most of the other events are like two coaches, and they would try to send like a coach that, you know, have some experience with one that maybe less experience, right? So they'll start them out that way, and then that person can develop experience. And you know, I started out the same way too. And then basically that person pretty soon will be the guy with the experience at an event, leading a guy who is new to the whole thing. So I think they have a good system going on. As much as we can do, as much as the U.S. can do to incorporate and have new coaches coming in, new blood, I think that's very important to keep it flowing. There's a lot of coaches out there that have really good skills, and you know, a lot of them are different from some of the coaches that we have. And it's always a good idea to see what other people are talking about in the coaching world. So I think that they're doing a good job with that, and I just think you just have to keep coaching your program, look for those opportunities when they open up, and then take them once they arrive.
Well, it seems like that's probably the, for lack of a better word, healthiest way, because how do you gain experience in order to be selected if not by gaining experience, right? You'd have to get it somehow, somewhere. So I think our time is actually drawing here to a close. So Omari, thanks again for sitting down and you know, talking optis and sailing. Before we go though, do you have anything you would say to all those kids that are watching, that are at home and wishing that they could sail?
Yeah, first of all, you know, anytime, bro, anytime you need me, anything for sailing, you know, I'm always around. You know, you and I are pretty close friends, so you know, you can ask me, especially when it comes to sailing. I'm always like, yes, let's do it. So no problem at all. I look forward to more of these things. In terms of Opti sailors sitting at home, man, I think one of the big lessons, one of the big things we can learn from this, and I do this with my program currently right now, is that we need to understand that sailing is more than just getting on the water and sailing our boats around. There's so many things to be learned at home. You know, there's so many resources right now. You know, we have you with the Opti TV providing a bunch of information, whether it's about the boat specifically, whether it's about the sailors and what they can be doing, whether it's about just clothing, anything. You know, there's so many resources out there. You know, YouTube is a big thing. You can just go type in certain things, Google, you type in certain things. I think a lot of the kids right now at home should be focusing a lot on YouTube, should be focusing a lot on like Opti TV, finding resources that they can use. Because what I think the goal is right now for kids that are at home, and I'm doing it right now as a coach with my sailors, is just going out, finding new information, learning new things that by the time you go back, you have a page full of things that you need to try. You know, you just write down a bunch of stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. I can't wait to go out to test this. I can't wait to try this. Because by the time you learn all of these things, it just makes you so much smarter in the sport. You should always be a student of the sport. You know, even myself as a coach, I consider myself a student of the sport, because every day I not only learn from coaches or from people, but I learn from the kids. So it's always very important, if you love the sport, to continue learning. Understand it's not just about being on the water all the time. And right now is a great time to use your resources, learn about things that you may not have known or things that you're not so clear about, and create a list of things that you can't wait to get back on the water to try. There's so many things: mass rate, leach, how do you affect certain things, how do your controls work, like roll tax, whatever it is. Like, there's so many things that the kids could be doing right now, watching videos of themselves, watching videos of other sailors, their world champion have videos online. It's so many things that they can do now to create like a profile or a checklist of things that once you get back on the water, you're going to be so excited because you want to start trying to figure out these new things that you just spent a month or 2 months like researching and finding out. So that would be my advice for any kid, any sailor, any coach. As a coach, if you're trying to better yourself, this is what you do. This is what I'm doing. I send out assignments to my sailors to keep them on their toes. I do Zoom talks with them to make sure that they're taking notes on these assignments with questions. And that's my way to keep them engaged. And as a coach, if you want to better yourself, that's what you do. You go, you sit, you listen to videos about leach and profiles and all of these things. And that's what I'm using my time to do, man. I'm trying to better myself as a sailor and as an individual. And I think this is a great time for the kids and any sailor to be able to do the same thing.
And that is fantastic advice. And I just want to say thanks again, and we hope to see you soon on another Ask Coach Chalk Talk.
Only if I did well on this one, right? So we'll talk about that. We'll see what the grade looks like, and then we can decide if I want to continue.
All right. Well, Omari, thanks, and we'll see you out on the water.
No problem, man. Take care.
So what do you guys think? Hopefully you guys like this video, and if you stuck long enough to watch this part, I want to say thank you for having participated in our first ever interview. We've got many more videos coming your way and more Opti content, so like and subscribe if you want to see more Opti TV. This has been Alberto, and we'll see you next time.